server so that anybody, and any one of you can download ThingWorx View today. It's available on all those platforms that I mentioned. It's free, and if you see one of these codes, you can go up to it and we'll present to you the experiences that are associated with it. You can access control those. You can put in a username and password, but you don't have to. It's up to you. And then this content is dynamically delivered, and then you have your experience. So having that tabletop experience is interesting, but as I said earlier, we're about bridging the physical and digital worlds. And a great example of doing that is augmented work instructions. How do I, in that coffee maker, how do I replace the cup? Or how do I perform the service on the Sysmex machine? Well, in this case, I'm going to show you how to replace the air filter in a Caterpillar generator. And I'm using a tool here to create that work instruction called Creo Illustrate. This is a tool that understands CAD data, it understands product structure, but it's like Microsoft PowerPoint animations, right? I grab things, I drag them, I create snapshots, I very easily create the steps that are required. You see some were already created, and I'm defining exactly how to pull this filter out with a rotating motion and remove it from the machine. Very simple, very intuitive for me to go off and do that, okay? Once I've created that sequence, in the studio environment, here I have the data for a Caterpillar generator. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that animation, that step-by-step sequence, and I'm going to apply it to this experience. So I've associated it with the geometry, and the next thing that I need to do is, in my experience, I need a little bit of user interface. I need to be able to tell when I'm holding my iPad up in this case, I need to tell the system when to play the animation. So I've just switched to the 2D layer of the canvas. We have a 3D layer and a 2D layer. And in the 2D layer, this is where I place my 2D information that shows up in the screen. So I've put a play button, and I've associated the action of clicking on the play button to play that animation. I could put other information, images, all of those kinds of things there as well. Then I've published this up to the cloud. Okay? Now, when I walk up to this machine in the parking lot with ThingWorx View, and I scan that marker that's on the same place in the physical machine as it was in the digital model, I'm presented with a variety of experiences. And when I select one of those, the experience is downloaded. You see the play button that I just created right there, and you see the air filter augmented with occlusion. So it looks like it's actually in the machine there inside of the geometry. And when I press play, again, very intuitive, very clear. I can see how to take this thing apart and service it. It's that easy. All right, spontaneous applause. I like that. All right, let me show you two more quick things.
Mike, last two.
Last two?
We have a panel after this we still got to do.
Am I taking too long? I'm close. I'm close. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Okay. I mentioned this is seamlessly integrated with the rest of ThingWorx, okay? And what that means is that any information that's captured in ThingWorx, sensor information, information from enterprise systems, all of that stuff can be exposed in these augmented reality experiences. So here what I'm doing is I'm placing a virtual gauge. There's actually in this case, there's not a fuel gauge on this machine. But I'm going to place a couple of virtual gauges in 3D here. Okay? And if I were to publish this experience right now, you'd see them floating there in space. But I don't want them just floating there in space. I want them to be driven by data coming off of the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select on that icon at the top right corner. And what I'm doing now is I'm browsing, if you will, the digital twin of this generator, where all of the IoT information is being captured for this family of machines. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to select things like fuel level and temperature and oil pressure. And I'm going to expose those to Studio where I can bind them to those specific gauges. And I can change the icons, and I can change the colors, and I can say when it's less than 50% make it yellow and less than 10% make it red. I can do all those kinds of things. But for the sake of time here, I'm just going to take each of those gauges, give them a nice icon, and bind those values to them. Okay? Same thing, I'm going to publish this up to the cloud, and then what? When I walk up to the machine outside, again, I'll scan the thing mark, I'll get the relevant experiences, but this time, I'll see that data for that particular generator streaming down into my experience. Now, if I had turned around and there was another generator and I scanned that one, I would get the relevant data for that particular machine. Okay, so there's AR data being presented, IoT data being presented in AR. And it's a very simple example, but I just showed you how I created it. It's that easy. Last thing, we have a pilot program. We want you to try this out. We want you to come to PTC. We want you to visit our website, sign up for the program so that you can take advantage of these tools. It's a 4-month program. We give you all the tools that you need, including ThingWorks, including Studio, so that you can play with this stuff, try it out on some use cases, and let us know what you think. Thank you very much for the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Let's hear it one more time from Mike. That was a really great presentation. If the panelists for the AR panel could come on up. In the meantime, I just want to say a couple of words. What was really cool about that, and I think what PTC is focused on, is this idea of context-aware computing. That's really what happens when you have all these distributed sensor networks or whatever. You're collecting information. You're collecting information, but that in and of itself is not necessarily of value to customers, right? So if we look at the tennis racket, for example, that was great. You've got a smart tennis racket that can tell you, here's where you hit your forehands, here's where you hit your backhands, here's what happened. But you can imagine a company being built on top of that actually uses that data to coach you and tell you, here's what you need to do to make your tennis game better. You know, I'm not going to go and look at hundreds of stroke data points to say, oh, here's what I need to do. But if it said, hey, every time you hit a backhand and then a forehand, you lose your point. So you need to get better at your backhands or whatever it means. So that's kind of how a new level of service can be provided on top of this data. And I think that's what we should all think about. When you talk about adding context to that, what if it also knew how much sleep I had that day? What if it knew what I ate that day? What if it knew what I was wearing while I was playing tennis, right? This is all context that can lead to decision making that actually influences what I'll do with my time, with my life. So with that, I want to quickly let this panel sort of self-introduce. These are a few folks from the Boston area that are deep in AR in their own way, and what I'd like to do is kind of use this as a time to say, okay, we've heard about the Internet of Things, distributed sensors, and what's capable there. From the perspective of people who are very deep in the AR space,